All right. Hello.
Hello.
How you going?
Good.
Good. For those who don't know, this is Catherine Gibbs, married to Trevor, and Trevor and Catherine have been a part of our church almost from the very start. I think it was only a few weeks that we'd been going,
Much, yeah.
and you guys came along. So, and that's 18 years that we've. May 2002 we started, so this is our 18th year, and still going strong. So, Catherine, tell us a little bit about your childhood, about where you grew up and what it was like.
Grew up, well, a mixture. But it was a little one. Started off in the North Shore of Sydney, and then my parents decided to up and leave Australia and head to England,
Okay.
which is where we lived for 3 years.
Okay.
So I came back to Australia when I was just shy of being 5 years old.
Okay.
I don't have a lot of memories of like England, which was why it was good to go back last year.
Yep.
And then lived on the North Shore and then moved to the Hills District around Dural and then Arcadia. I went to private girls' school, Anglican private girls' school, which was interesting to say the least, because bullying wasn't a thing at that time, and I was bullied. And so I made a decision, primarily because of the distance that I was travelling to school, to actually go to a country school.
Okay.
So for my final 2 years, I went up to Armidale,
Yep.
to New England Girls' School, but always had a great love of Christ
Yeah.
from a very early age, and was heavily involved, at school in Crusaders.
Yep.
Which met during lunchtimes. Just didn't know what God had planned for my life, and then probably not so heavily involved like in the last 2 years of school with the amount of work. But yeah, we had chapel every week, assemblies. Being a boarder.
So you moved around a fair bit with school, like you did.
I boarded for the last 2 years.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
My parents were still living at Arcadia at that stage.
Yep.
We actually lived right above Vision Valley, which is a Christian camp. So it was always easy, Christmas carols, just go
Yeah.
over the fence and go the Christmas carols down the hill.
Okay.
So it was quite easy.
All right. Very good. So tell us about hobbies. What hobbies have you got? What are your interests?
I love horses,
Yeah.
and currently have an interest in a racehorse. Would love to get back horse riding again.
Okay. So an interest in a racehorse, is that a share in
It's
a
a
racehorse?
small share in the racehorse, yeah.
Racehorse. Yeah. Any
Un-
good?
Unraced yet.
All right.
Only 2 years old, so still a baby.
Okay.
And this will actually be my second one. Unfortunately, there was an injury to my first one that meant that it had to be put down.
Okay.
It was a career
Yep.
and life-threatening injury, which was a bit of a shame.
All right.
Gardening,
Yep.
cross-stitch. I think everyone who knows me knows that I am a lover of cross-stitch.
Yeah.
And one of my works is up the back.
Yeah. Yep. Ah, very good. How did you come to faith? Like you're in obviously Anglican schools, and then Armidale was an Anglican school, and you did a lot of Christian stuff in school. But how did you actually come to the point where you made a decision to follow Christ?
I made a decision actually while I was at school.
Yeah.
Because like with the Anglican Church, you're baptized and then you accept like confirmation, and I just knew that I wanted to be confirmed when I was 11 or 12.
Yep.
Which was the age that they sort of opened confirmation up to anyone who wanted it, and just always had a sense of knowing, and I guess that has stood me, like in, I guess, great stead, throughout my life, because I didn't see it as being bullied, at school. I can certainly look back on and say, yes, I was bullied.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my late friends, and she said something to me at my 21st, and she said, if anyone from Abbotsleigh could see you now, you'd walk over the top of them.
Yeah.
And
It's a nice thing to get.
it was a lovely thing. Unfortunately, she took her own life a few years later.
Yeah. That's very sad.
She
Very
had,
sad.
she had a bit of a troubled childhood.
Yeah.
But and it stuck with me
So
for a long time.
yeah. So so you made a decision when you were about 11 or 12. And how's your journey been since then?
I think like every Christian, up and down.
Yeah. Tell me some of the highs, and if you can, some of the lows.
I think I'll probably actually start with the lows. After I left school, I went and studied in South Australia for a horse husbandry course, and had a car accident, which I wasn't like seriously injured, but I guess being away from a church environment, because I even though I had like a car, it was difficult to get out, and you get involved in that uni environment. I think when you're younger, and blame myself like for the accident. It wasn't my fault. It was something I tried to avoid, and I got to a point where it was like a legal situation. And I just asked my parents just for advice, as any child would do.
Yep.
And was basically almost stood on my head by my parents. And I just went, well, what's the point? And had very bad thoughts. I was like, well, if my parents don't care for me, well, who else does?
Yeah, yeah.
But just had this real sense that I wasn't to end it. And I turned around to someone who was actually sort of doing nutrimedics. And I said to her, where do you go to church? You talk about church all the time. Where do you go to church? And she said, just above the motor registry here in Maroubra. I moved back to Sydney, and I was going away for the weekend, and I said, what time are the services? And she said to me, 10 o'clock and 6 o'clock. I said, well, I won't make the 10, but I will be there at 6. And I was there at 6, and I just felt God saying to me, you've made the right decision to come home.
Yep.
Because...
So the low happened when you were in South Australia with the accident, and
continued pro for quite a couple of years.
And then one of the highs, or the high that got you back on track, was attending C3 at Maroubra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess meeting Trevor was another high. Although I think like every marriage, we've got our rocky roads.
Yeah.
Some people would know that we did face a difficult situation earlier this year.
Yeah.
Trevor and I, which it was difficult because I didn't want to end the marriage.
Yeah.
But I felt that there was no other way.
Yeah. But it's all good now.
It's all good.
And that's like what you said before, is about the highs and lows. Everyone has highs and lows on our journey through life, and it's getting through that valley, which is the low.
Yep.
Because we know that we get that all the time, don't we? We just have to keep pushing on. We have to keep pushing on, and keep communicating, and that will help us get through those highs and lows. So your your parents weren't very supportive of you when you were in South Australia after the accident. Is that right?
Yeah, just
And
they were dad.
but
Anyway,
now they are.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've always, growing up, ironically, I probably felt closer to my father, who is a total non-Christian, does not believe, but always supported my brother and I if we wanted to go to church.
Yeah.
Never ever stopped us despite his unbelief. Mum, did go to a church for a while. She stopped, and now she's actually a member of the Anglican Church here.
Yeah.
And has been for quite a few years. It was actually a Christmas Day about 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
That Mum went back to church.
Nice.
So that was nice, and I think she was encouraged by Trevor and I on our journey.
Yeah. Good. So what brought your parents out here, and how did you end up in Blaney?
Dad brought a business. I think Dad he'd been in the stock market.
Yeah.
And just survived the stock market crash of 87, because he was working in the futures market, and he just had a real sense that something was going to go wrong. So got everything out, sold everything just before the market crashed.
Yeah.
Which saved us as a family.
Mm.
And I think he always wanted to get back, to the country. After I went to ag college, Mum and Dad moved to North Sydney, but every weekend they were out visiting the country.
Yeah.
And so I think Dad was looking for another opportunity, and they settled on Orange, and they bought a commercial laundry in Orange, which they actually ended up buying and then moving here to Blaney. Blaney Council were a lot more supportive than Orange.
Mm.
And they ran it for probably about 18 years.
Yep.
And then sold it 14 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. And you still work there?
And I still work there.
Yeah.
At the
Okay.
moment.
Did you work there when your dad ran it?
Yes.
Okay. How was that working with your dad?
It wasn't too bad. I think I knew sort of the way he was.
Yeah.
And he is very much a person of, I tell you once and you should know it.
Okay.
So he's not someone you can sort of go back and say, oh, how do you do this again, or whatever. And I think I was able to deal with sometimes his temper probably better than my brother ever did.
Yeah, okay. All right, so your Christian walk, tell me, what's the toughest thing that you find living as a Christian in today's culture?
I think it's working in a non-Christian environment.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it is, I guess, a comfort to some people.
Mm.
I've had people reach out, to me who, say, how can you be so positive, or how can you be like this, when there's so much stress at work? And I mean, I get affected by the stress. Like my role has changed since COVID. Prior to COVID, I was 2 days on the floor and 2 days in the office. And since COVID, I've been 4 days on the floor.
Mm.
So I've been in the work environment, the floor environment, which is not one you can escape, but at least in the office I could escape it for 2 days a week and just be myself and just run the office and things like that. So that's a challenge.
Mm.
But I have recently had one of my co-workers reach out to me, and she said, she was talking about faith, and how do you have it? And so it's nice that people know that I am a Christian, but I don't put it, down their throats.
Yeah.
And just let them come to me. But it certainly is a challenge when you hear some of the language going around the place.
So when the Bible says that we are called to be salt and light, it doesn't tell us that we have to be a spotlight, and we're not like the light in the old movies where the bad guys getting interviewed and they put a spotlight in their face, and we just have to live a life that demonstrate the values that we believe in, and then other people will see that light in us. And that light, depending on how you go with living those values, is depending on how bright that light will be. And you're right, that people will come to you when they're in need. They will come looking for answers when they're in need. So that's great. And I think being a Christian in a non-Christian environment is actually what we're supposed to be. I think that's where we're supposed to be most of the time. I think that's where God wants us to help bring light and salt into those. To bring, in the Message version it says, bring God's colours and flavours into the world. And we can do that in our work environments. Glenda at the high school, me at the public school, in our workplace, in our school environments, or in wherever we are with Nestle or with clients or whatever it is. There are always going to be people that are non-Christians that we can just demonstrate God's love just through who we are and doing the right thing. Okay, what is your hope for the future? 5 years, 10 years?
Hopefully within 5 years, I will be a qualified accountant.
Yep.
And
because you're doing an online degree.
I'm doing an online degree, Bachelor of Accounting. Yep. I've done my diploma previously, and I've now started in July this year, going to my Bachelor. So yeah, my hope is to be an accountant, either with a existing firm or working from home.
Yep.
And I guess I'm wanting to make steps in that direction and get out of my current workplace and look for an accounts role.
Yep.
Somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay.
In Orange or Bathurst, or even here in Blaine.
Yep. So that's 5 years, 10 years. Because you've got plenty of years left.
Oh, I've got stacks of years.
You've got a lot more years than me.
And I guess last year showed me that sometimes our plans aren't God's plans.
True that.
After I went overseas last year, I guess I came back with my own plan. And as most of us would know, that was radically turned on its head soon after I got home. And so I've just sort of gone, okay, God, whatever you want me to do.
So you don't have a plan? You're just leaving it all up to God?
I'm leaving.
Come on, you must have a plan. I know you've got a plan.
I'd love to have my own property and horses and running my own business. And I feel that I know God wants to use me somewhere. Else I don't know where yet.
Yep.
I'm just totally being open to Him at the moment because I'm stepping down from a role next year. So in
church, yeah, that's right. Catherine has been our treasurer for a goodly number of years, like too many for me to remember. But as I mentioned last week, there's a bit of transition happening in church with Gabby and Lewis getting more involved in youth. Glenda's going to be more involved in my role here. I'm going to be more involved in Cowra, and Malcolm, because Malcolm's going to sort of step a bit sideways and take on the secretary-treasurer role of church from around July next year. So you sidestepped all of that future question pretty well, but I am going to ask it again. What plans do you have? I know you've gone, well, I've put it in God's hands, but we can't live like that. That's a great thing to do. Say, God, I'm open to do whatever you want me to do. But in the meantime, I'm going to walk this road. I'm going to do these steps, and I want you to open doors or close doors or whatever. What are your plans for the future besides your massive horse stud and your accountancy business?
Really, that has been my focus. I guess, like, I'm blessed
Yep.
at the moment that I have both my parents alive. So, at the moment I feel very, centered to here
Yep.
and looking after them.
Yep.
But
So is Dad's property any good for horses?
it would need a lot of work, and it's actually too big. I'm not going to take on a 200-acre property.
Okay. All right.
Something if I can get around 5 or 10 acres would be absolutely perfect. But yes, I do constantly look at Dad's property and think, why are you so big?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you met Trevor at Maroubra Triple C. Hello, Elsie, you want to come up here? Oh, there you go. Yum.
Yum.
So you met Trevor at Triple C. How long have you been married?
22 years.
22 years. Amazing. Fancy putting up with Trevor for 22 years.
Yeah, I know. Some days I wonder.
All right, that's awesome. One last question, and then we're done. You said before that your main hobby is horses, and you have a share in a racehorse. You got any tips for the Melbourne Cup?
Ask me next week.
No, next week. But the interview is today.
I know,
Oh.
but the cup's not run till Tuesday week.
Okay, all right. Thanks. You're no help. You're no help at all.
Well, put it this way: anything can change in a week,
Yeah.
and we all know that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Catherine. Thanks for being so open and honest and transparent in your answers. And thanks for volunteering to be interviewed today. So give Catherine a hand, guys.